Ooh, a little bit. Let's talk about tropes today. So it may feel like you have lived a unique life, which you have. You're a unique individual that has had your own successes and failures and all of those things, and that makes you uniquely you and a unique author. However, if you're anything like me, you have probably felt at some point like every idea you've ever had, every story idea you've ever had has already been told. That you have already had a character like that you've read about, or you see something and you're like, oh, that was my idea. And that's where tropes come in. So we're going to talk about tropes today, and why you shouldn't despair, because you just need to find your own angle. And you probably already have that. You're just letting it feel like, oh gosh, nothing ever new is being written and it's the same stories over and over and over. And we'll talk about that. So tropes are nothing new. We've been using them forever. Tropes are the comfortable, sort of not determined, but known ways things happen. So they're patterns. So tropes are just patterns. It's a fancy word for patterns that we see in writing or in TV shows. Or if you've ever watched a Hallmark movie, Hallmark movies are sort of their own trope. You can tell how far you are in the plot of by the how much more of the movie you have. You have 20 minutes, here's where you're supposed to be in that movie. And that's because they're patterns, and people like patterns. It's part of the human brain that likes finding patterns. We like to feel comfortable. We like to know why things are happening, what's going to happen. And that's why we watch the same TV shows. We watch the same things. How many police dramas can there be on television right now? We know what they are. We know those characters, but we watch them because we feel comfortable in that storytelling. But they also all need something new and exciting, a new angle. And that's why, just thinking about those cop procedural shows, you have CSI, you have NCIS, you have FBI people, you have sheriffs, you have 911 operators, you have all these things are just making them a little bit new, but they're the same thing. They're tropes. So let's talk about how we can use tropes in our own writing and find our own angle. All right. So one of the most talked about kinds of tropes are love story tropes. And who doesn't love a love story? So here are some of the most well-known love story tropes. Friends to lovers. They start as friends. They get together in the end. Enemies to lovers, where they hate each other. And then in the end, they love each other. Strangers to lovers, right? A new acquaintance. The love triangle. Oh, as a YA author and someone who has read a million YA books, love triangle. Oh, ever since Hunger Games and Twilight, that has been quintessential to a lot of young adult writing. The fake relationship, the forced proximity, we have to be together. There's one bed in the hotel room. All of those things are stories that have been told forever and ever. And those aren't the only tropes. There's a lot more, and we're going to talk about another one in a minute. But we like those. Literally, you can go on to TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, and you'll see hashtags for friends to lovers, enemies to lovers. And that is how people find the next book they want to read, is because they want these tropes. So they're not a bad thing. They are things that we like. They're comfortable patterns that we enjoy as humans. But we have to figure out, how are we going to be original? So let's look at those quintessential love triangles from the Hunger Games and Twilight. Now, these were kind of the super popular YA books when I was in high school. So I don't know you. I don't know your life. I'd love to drop it in the comments, but I don't know if these were super popular when you were growing up or not. I don't know if you've read them, but they're pretty famous and they all have movies, so you probably know them. So I just made a quick little chart here, and I'll move my face so that we can see them, about how the story is different and how those stories are the same. So in Hunger Games, which I'm going to refer to sometimes as HG here because it's a lot to type, the boys are representing peace and war. Twilight is fantasy. Hunger Games is sci-fi. Hunger Games is about survival and manipulative government. Twilight is mostly about the romance, if not all about the romance. Hunger Games, she has to pretend to like one boy, that forced relationship. That's another trope. When she really likes the other one. Twilight, one boy pushes her away at first. That's not present in Hunger Games. Twilight, the boys have superpowers because one's a vampire and one is a werewolf. And so that's a big change from Hunger Games, right? Where you have a baker and a hunter. Or I guess he is a coal miner, maybe. Hunger Games, the romance is the subplot. In the Hunger Games, she cares about the boys, but she doesn't need their love in the same way. She's not pining away, crying because one of them isn't talking to her for a minute. Hunger Games, she's known them both forever. She grew up with them versus Twilight. She's moved here. They're new. Great. So pretty different stories, but there are still some of those patterns that we see in those tropes. So one boy is moody and one boy is supportive. Both of the boys care about the female protagonist a lot. Both boys are considered attractive and the girl is your typical girl. Now, both of them are not like other girls because they're insert blank, blank, blank here. But we're not seeing them like someone crazy different. One boy is treated like a friend more than the other. It is a one girl, two guy love triangle. And that is a great place for there to be a new angle. Maybe it's three boys. Maybe it's two girls and a guy, or maybe they actually are a triangle and this person likes this person and this person likes this person, not really an arrow. So lots of room to play with the same love triangle idea. And there's an overarching governing power that doesn't love the relationship. Great. Even in these two, we can see that these are the quintessential, when people think about a love triangle, they often think about Twilight. Again, this is when I grew up. People wore shirts that were like Team Jacob, Team Edward. Like people were into this love triangle. Same with Hunger Games. Team Peeta, Team Gale. But they're very different. So it's all about finding your own spin. So a really, really popular love trope, and again, we're just talking love today because why not? Who doesn't love love? Is the star-crossed lovers. Most people think Romeo and Juliet for this, so we'll talk about Romeo and Juliet. It is a play by William Shakespeare, generally considered the greatest love story ever told. Personally, as both a English teacher, creative writing teacher, author, and drama teacher, I don't love Romeo and Juliet. There are a lot of other Shakespeare plays I love more, but the fact that star-crossed lovers is so important in the Western canon of literature, let's talk about it. So let's say you wanted to write a star-crossed lovers story. And you're like, how do I make it new and exciting? There's been a million retellings of Romeo and Juliet. I mean, Romeo and Juliet. Nomeo and Juliet. If you think about any story where two characters are not supposed to be together and they fall in love, you will see West Side Story, which I have right there, a playbill from West Side Story. All of these things, star-crossed lovers. So how can you make it new and exciting? A new time or place. Maybe you're in the future, in the past, a different culture, a different country. There are a million different ways for the group. So in Romeo and Juliet, it's two families that don't get along, the Montagues and the Capulets. But what groups are you going to make them? Are they two rival gangs? Are they two spies on opposite sides of a problem? Are they city and town people, poor and rich, aliens and humans? Any two groups that can be against each other and told to keep apart can make for star-crossed lovers. So the idea that it has to be, two families. How many stories have I read about like two warring farming groups, like the Hatfield McCoy kind of idea, or right? There's so many of them that it's kind of hard to like realize that they're all star-crossed lovers. So this is another great place is the different type of characters. So Romeo and Juliet obviously is a boy and a girl. Age-wise, they are a 20-something kid and a 13-year-old girl. But you could play with gender, two boys, two girls, people who are non-binary or agender. You could talk about ethnicity. Maybe that's what's keeping them apart. Maybe they are two different ethnicities, like in West Side Story. Maybe one of the characters is neurodivergent, or we are members of the LGBTQIA plus community members. There's a million different things you can do with the characters. Maybe one is into saving the environment and the other is a big tech person who is polluting the environment. One place where you can see how these tropes work really well, and I know I mentioned it earlier and I kind of made fun of it, but it's so true. Hallmark videos have this down to a science. And if you've never watched a Hallmark video, gather your grandma or someone and watch a few, because they do a really great job of telling the same patterns in stories over and over and over again, while also coming up with different types of characters, different types of groups, different new time and place, right? How can this be different if we add a Christmas tree? So they do an amazing job of it. You got to give them credit where credit is due. Are they the most exciting? Wow, I couldn't believe that was going to happen. Oh, of course not. That's not what they're trying to do. If that's what you're trying to do, is come up with something really big and exciting, I ask you to think about it like this. You are unique, so make your story unique. And that can be really hard, especially when you're starting out writing, to think about, hey, everything's been done. Or, the trope I want to do has been done. Or the trope I want to do, and the characters I want to do, and the plot, and it feels like all of these things have been done. So I like to think of it as pieces of a puzzle. And if you pull one piece from 1,000 different puzzles, and you make a brand new puzzle, then yeah, those pieces were used in other things, but all together, it's something completely brand new, right? So you're not taking the entire puzzle and putting in one new piece. You're taking tiny little bits from all these stories from the thousands and thousands of years that people have been telling stories, and you're putting them together for something new. And then I also like to think of it as a recipe, right? Most people's family have someone in their family, a grandma, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin who has a secret recipe for chocolate chip cookies. Okay, well, they're probably pretty similar, but something about them makes them different. And then also, if you could never use pieces of recipes for anything else, those ingredients, right? If you could never use chocolate chips for anything other than cookies, we wouldn't have mint chocolate chip ice cream, which is my mom's favorite, or double chocolate chunk brownies, which my dad loves. So you can use the ingredients to make something new. What we want to make sure we're doing is we're not copying, because plagiarism is bad and illegal. So taking credit for something that isn't yours, even if it's an idea or a thought, right? I think by now we all know that turning someone else's work in is plagiarism and it's wrong. But it also is taking people's ideas and changing very little about them. So if we go back to that puzzle metaphor, and if you take a 1,000-piece puzzle and you swap out one piece, that's plagiarism, right? We want one piece from 1,000 different puzzles all together. AI writing, just as an author, as a teacher, it's not your work. It has no soul. It's literally pulling ideas from the internet. So if you want to be new and you want to be different, don't use ChatGPT, right? As we grow up learning to write, we often emulate a writer's style, but while it's good practice, we want to make sure that we're finding our own style, our own characters, our own vibes. Let you be you. You have lived your life. No one else has lived that. Someone else may have told a story about friends to lovers, but they've never lived your life, had your experiences, had your thoughts. So use those. And then my number one thing, I know this is kind of about copying, but if you get stuck, read. Read, because you'll see how those tropes are pulled in all these different places and combined in new, crazy, cool ways. And you'll find the tropes that you really enjoy. Personally, I love a good found family. I love the rebel with a huge sense of loyalty. Those are characters and story plots that I will read pretty much any genre of because I love them. So read, find your tropes, find your people, find how you're going to take all those 1,000 puzzle pieces and put into something new. All right? Website for any updates on events, books, blog posts, or check me on socials. All right.